If you died tomorrow, what would they say at your funeral? Would they say, well, he was a good father, or she was a good mother, he was a good son or daughter? Would they say you lived for your kids, you were a hard-working, good employee? Would they say, well, he knew his Bible and she was always at church whenever the meetings were on? She was always there. Is that what they'd say about you? Would they say you were kind and generous? Would they say that you had a successful career? What would they say about you if you died tomorrow? Would anyone say they didn't live for themselves? They lived for Christ. Would anybody say that about you and I, or us? See, that's what a Christian is, and that's what a Christian does. Paul says this, 2 Corinthians 5:14, for the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded this, that one has died for all, therefore all have died. And he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised again. It says in verse 15, and he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for their sake and raised again. What does he mean by that? That those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him. But what he's saying here is that the Christian has died to themselves, that we have died to ourselves. We've turned our back on the me priority. We've turned our back on the I philosophy. We've rejected a lifestyle of self. That's what a Christian is. This means that we've put God the Father first. We've embraced God the Son and his lifestyle, not the lifestyle of this world. And we are being directed not by our desires, not by our goals and objectives, but by the Spirit of God and his goals and objectives. That's what it means to no longer live for ourselves, but for Christ. Now, someone might ask, when did we die with him? Well, Romans 6 says that happened in baptism. Romans 6:5 says this, for if we have been united with him in a death like his, we will certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We know that our old self was crucified with him so that the body of sin might be destroyed and we might no longer be enslaved to sin. For whoever has died is free from sin. But if we have died with Christ, we believe that we will also live with him. In verse 3 there in Romans 6:3 says, do you not know that all of you who have been baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? Therefore we have been buried with him by baptism into his death, so that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, so we too might walk in newness of life. For verse 7, for whoever has died is free from sin, but if we have died with Christ, we believe that we also live with him. So when we put our faith and our trust in Christ in baptism, we died to ourselves. We put our hands up before witnesses and said that we're guilty of sin. and that we've ruined our own lives, and that we're handing them over to Christ to die with him and rise to walk in newness of life. And in that, we turned our back on this me priority, on this I philosophy, on this self lifestyle, and we put the Father first. We embraced the Son's way of living, and we are guided not by our own desires, our own plans. We're guided by the Spirit of God. See, when you become a Christian, life is no longer my agenda, but it's God's agenda. And it's God's agenda is living not for ourselves, but living for Christ. Now, how do we know that we're doing that? How do we know we're no longer living for ourselves, but living for Christ? Well, it's not a matter of church attendance. It's not a matter of how much I read my Bible. It's not a matter of how much money I give. It's not a matter if I follow through my daily ritual of Bible study and prayer and fasting or giving or serving or any of those things. It's not that those things are bad things, but that's not sign in the symbol that we are living for Christ. We know we're living for Christ when we love one another. And we're not talking about having warm, cuddly feelings for one another. That is not the love of Christ. That's a definition of this world's idea of love, that you would have warm feelings towards me, and I would have warm feelings towards you. Now, there's nothing wrong with warm feelings towards one another, but we're not called to have warm feelings towards one another. We're called to love one another as Christ has loved us. And how do we know what love is? That Christ laid his life down for us, and we ought to lay our lives down for the brethren. That's how we know what love is. We put the other's good, whoever the other might be, at the forefront of our minds and of our actions. Love is an action word. So this dying to self and living for Christ starts at baptism. But it's an ongoing and daily activity. And we need to recognize that. First gym I ever joined, when I wanted to try to get into shape, build a little muscle, was Planet Fitness. Planet Fitness had pizza days for everybody who had a membership. They could come and have pizza on one day. At other times they had a donut day. They also had a bagel morning where you could go and have bagels and cream cheese. And when you went up to check in and check out at the counter, they had baskets, literally, of candy that you could help yourself to. Tootsie Rolls and all kinds of other things. Now, why did they have that? Well, job security. Keep feeding those people candy, donuts, and pizza. They're going to have to come back again. They're going to have to work out again. But their business model was based on this. They understood that people feel better and healthier just having a gym membership, even when they don't use it. That was their whole business model. They knew that a person would pay $15, $20 a month just to have a membership, not use it and feel better about their lives. And they were making money hand over fist. But the sad facts is having a gym membership doesn't build muscle or get you fit and healthy. Regular physical exercise does. And regular, strenuous, hard activities. That's what builds muscle and keeps you fit and healthy. So being baptized doesn't mean anything unless we no longer live for ourselves. but for Christ. Unless we love one another as he's loved us, the baptism means nothing if we do not act out this life of love and give up ourselves as Christ gave up himself on the cross. See, that's the way a man or a woman is transformed in the image of Christ. That's the way we embrace the life that is found in Jesus. That we live this life of love every day to the best of our own ability. Someone says, well, isn't that hard? You better believe it's hard. You're never going to do anything harder in your life than try to love as Christ has loved. Someone says, well, isn't it boring living for Jesus and not living for myself? Well, yes, it can be. It can be. But boring compared to what? You're going to live your life to make money? You're going to live your life for your family? You're going to live your life for horses or for food or for church? Some people will live their lives to play computer games, or they'll live their lives to party and drink and drugs and chase women or men. Or they'll live their lives for politics and religion. They'll do that. Try that. How's that working for you? See, the facts are, if we choose not to live for Jesus, we choose to live for something else. And the truth is this: it's a disaster. If we choose not to live for Christ, to no longer live for ourselves, if we choose to put our priorities before everything else, regardless if it's church going, regardless if it's exercise, regardless if it's our family, regardless if it's knowing the Bible, it's all a disaster waiting to happen. And you're starting to see it. Now, it might take a bit of pain to get you there, to see it. But it's time to wake up to the disaster that it is. It's not going to get any better the longer we go on. It's just the way of it. Because there is no life outside of Jesus Christ. It's all a delusion. It's all a lie. It's all a deception. We're going to wake up to that deception by trying to pull ourselves off the floor with our own strength. And we will not do it. I would never bungee jump. I don't get the thrill out of tying giant elastics to my legs and jumping off a height. You can do it. Go ahead. Knock yourself out. But I won't. I saw a guy who was a wingsuit man. I don't know if you know what a wingsuit man is. A wingsuit man is, he doesn't tie elastics to his legs and jump off great heights. He gets on top of mountains with a suit that has kind of wings on it. I mean, 15,000 feet up there. And I saw an interview with a guy, and they covered it, where he jumps off the mountain and flies to the bottom in a wingsuit. It takes a minute and a half to do it. And he flies down, near-death experience. And thank goodness the man lands. But in the interview with him, he said this. He says, when I do this, I truly feel alive. This is what makes me feel alive. And I couldn't help think to myself, what does he do for the other 23 hours in the day? What about the other 7 days in the week that he doesn't do this? How does he feel then? He must be the lowest man in the world, the most depressed, the most down, the most dark person you could meet, if having to jump off a mountain is the only time he feels alive. He must have the most boring life possible. He's a thrill seeker, but he's bored out of his mind. That's the same for anyone who chooses not to put Christ first, who chooses not to live for him. It all results in boredom. It doesn't matter how high the score is you get in the game. It doesn't matter how thrilling it is, how pleasurable it is, whatever it might be, how big the bank account gets. It's all empty in the end. And it's a lot more empty, let me tell you this, and boring than it is to follow Christ. So die to yourself that you might have life. That's why Christ came. He came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. A Christian turned atheist, it was reported to me that he said this. He at one time was a disciple of Christ, and he turned to become an atheist. Why? So his life could go down in flames. He didn't know it. He didn't know it. He thought they were all having a wonderful time out there. But his life went down in flames. But even in the middle of that, he said something, and even a broken clock is right twice a day. He said this to a Christian. He says, you know, one thing about being a Christian is you've got a group of people who have your back. He says, in atheism, they don't have that. And he was right about that. He's right. If we choose to live for our agenda, if we put the me, myself, and I first, if we live amongst the partiers, and I've lived amongst them, and the radicals, be they political or whatever they might be, or the money makers, or the gangsters, or the religionists, and the religionists are the worst. You want to live amongst a bunch of people who care nothing about you? Go find yourself a bunch of religionists whose whole life revolves around reading the Bible, getting the ritual right, making sure everybody's given this, that, or the other. They care nothing about you or I. The facts are, if you choose that, you're on your own. You're on your own. And why is that? Why is our atheist friend on his own? Well, it's quite simple. The unbelieving world lives for themselves. The Christian lives for Christ. The unbelievers and the religionists live for themselves. See, the unbeliever's too busy being the best version of them that they can be. And the religionist is too busy being on their own spiritual journey to care about you and I. See, there is no us in this world system, be it religious or secular. There's only me. Christians live for Christ, and that means they love like Christ. Not perfectly, but we would do it perfectly if we could. And Christians love you, and they love me, and they love us. That's what Christians do. That doesn't mean they like you. It doesn't mean they like me. They love me despite not liking me. See, it's not optional for the Christian to not love. They might not have to like me, but they have to love me. They might not have to like you, but they have to love you. And listen, in this world, there's nobody else that does. Nobody else that loves you like the disciples of Christ. See, we're not called to like one another. We are called to die to yourselves and to live for Christ. And that means we love one another. And we love you, and the Christians love you, not because we're good people. We'd like to be. I'd like to be. We're trying to be. But we're no better than those who are unbelievers. But we love you not because we're good people. We love you not because we're getting endless pats on our back to do it. We love you because Christ loved us first. That's why we love. And Paul says that to the Corinthians, the love of Christ controls us, compels us, takes a hold of us. And because he loved, with the wind behind us downhill and a good lawyer, we are going to love as Christ loved. Regardless if we fail, we're going to get up the next day and we're going to give it another go. So if you die tomorrow, what would people say about you? Would they say, well, he was a good father? Would they say he's a good mother, or she's a good mother? Will they say he worked hard all of his life and he was kind to his neighbours? Will they say that? What would they say at your funeral? Will they say he knew the Bible? Boy, he prayed long prayers. Is that what they'll say? What will they say about you? Will they say he didn't live for himself? He lived for Christ. There's a day coming, Paul says, we're going to all stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account for the deeds done in the body. Doesn't matter what they say at your funeral. What God says on that day is what really matters. Because the question's going to be brought to light is, who have you lived for? Who have you lived for? For yourself? For your family? For the church? Or for Christ? There's a day coming when that question about my life, your life, and our lives is going to be answered. So that's what we're doing. We're getting ready for that day. The day when everything will be brought to light. So as we go this week, it doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It doesn't matter what you did during the week. Put it behind you, forget about it, let it go. You got to let it go. You're a Christian. There's grace and forgiveness. But you got to let it go. Because we got a work to do. We've got to lay our lives down. And we got to love as Christ has loved us. We're going to have our last song in a prayer, and then we'll eat together.